Welcome to my blog, and thank you so much for all the comments, all the likes on my last video. It's been real a pleasure. The Trish Regan piece. Right now we almost have 12,000 people reached. We have more than 3,200 showings. It's just been going much better than anticipated, and all that is due to you, that you share, you like. So thank you very much, and remember, if you like this, do it again. It means a lot. That's what keeps the show running. Today I want to talk about something that we all talk about all the time, that is money. But I don't want to talk about how to make money. I don't want to talk about how to invest it. I want to talk about the very concept of money. When I came to America, I bought an old van, I drove around, I tried to look for business opportunities, and I went into the foreclosure market. I came here just after the financial crisis, and I decided to buy a couple of houses. And all of a sudden, it struck me, why is this bank-owned property for Bank of America? Why are they giving me this house? Because I give them some money that I made in China or made in Europe. I never did anything for these guys, but they give me a house. Why is that? That's an interesting concept. So I start to study the subject of money. And I want you to do the same. So I'm just going to give you, I could talk about this for hours, and you should probably study it for hours. But let me give you a short introduction what money is. In short, money is the greatest invention that man ever made. It's what more or less puts us on difference from every other species on this planet. When we lived in villages back in the day, we needed to find a way to trade with our neighbor. If I was a hunter, I could catch rabbits, and he was a baker. I could trade a rabbit for a piece of bread, and that worked out pretty nicely. But when things got more sophisticated, somebody became a carpenter, some became a fisherman, some had chickens. It became difficult, because if I was a rabbit, how much of a rabbit was it? A foot or a leg or the whole body for 5 pieces of bread? And how many rabbits did go into getting a house from the carpenter? So we had to find a way to divide up our production. And it was not any government who came out with the system of money, say money is this and you set your price yourself. No, money happened sporadically around the world. Some people, they started to deal in feathers, valuable feathers that were nice. Some did it in flour, some did it in gemstones. But as time evolved, humanity, independent of each other, they chose gold as money. Meaning that everything got priced in grams of gold in Egypt, in China, in America, in Scandinavia, independently of each other, not because people they spoke to each other. It just happened that way because humans somehow desired gold. Everybody wanted to get their hands on gold. It was beautiful, it was easy divisible, it was easy to store, it was hard to fake, because how do you come up with fake gold? So all around the world, gold emerged automatically as money. So the story came to be, if I had a rabbit, the marketplace, they set a price. You know, if there's a lot of rabbits for sale, of course they're cheaper, and if there's a few rabbits, they were more expensive. So if you sold a rabbit, you got 1 gram of gold, and if you want buy a piece of bread, it maybe cost half a gram of gold. What do I know? But anyway, people, they transacted in gold. It was easy to save. If you worked a lot, you caught a lot of rabbits, you sold it, you could stockpile your gold, and all of a sudden you could take 14 days vacation because you had all the gold stored, and you could buy food for those 14 days. So money was a great invention, invented sporadically all over the world by humanity. It was a great system. Of course, what this did is another story. I want to dig into it. It made specialization even more now, because you didn't even, before you maybe had to be a hunter and a house builder, but you could buy bread from the bakery. Now, because of the gold, you could maybe specialize in breeding chickens. And all you did was chickens, because when you sold a chicken to everybody in the village, people would bring you gold, and you could buy whatever you desired with that gold. So it's a pretty neat system it came about. The problem that arose from that was, if you saved up gold, people could easily steal it from you. You could lose it if there was a flood, who knows what. So commercial banks, private banks arose. There was a guy, a businessman, he figured, you know what, I'm gonna create a big safe over here. I'm gonna hire 5 guards to guard that safe. Guys came in with the gold and said, can you watch this gold for me? And they deposited 10 grams of gold with this guy, with the bank, put it in the safe, it got locked, and the guardsman guarded it. So like there was a hunter and a baker and a house builder, now there's a bank in town, and he stored all the gold on behalf of the citizen in that village. The bank, they got paid typically maybe 1% of the amount deposited. So you deposit 100 gram, the bank said, I'll take 1 gram as a fee for this service to keep it safe right there. What happened was, whenever you deposited 1 gram of gold into this bank account, this safe, this vault, the banker, he wrote out one piece: Commercial Bank of Florida hereby guarantees that the holder of this certificate can redeem it for 1 piece of gold. So you got this piece of paper. And of course, all of a sudden, everybody in the village, they carried around these pieces of certificates. You knew that if you brought this piece of paper to the bank, they'd give you your gold back. So on the marketplace, all of a sudden, you didn't give the seller of apples a piece of gold. You gave him just a certificate. You gave him, I want 10 apples, here's 1 certificate of 1 gram of gold in the bank. So the apple seller got the certificate, and he was happy about that. Maybe he went down to the bank, gave the bank his certificate back. You got your piece of gold. That's how it worked out. It was a brilliant system. It was safe. The bankers, they found out that they made money by charging a fee to the customers. They found out, you know what, there's a smart idea here. I can loan out this money that I have on deposit here, because a guy who maybe was an apple seller, he wanted to be a fisherman. And to be a fisherman, he had to get some fishing net. And he had no idea how to do fishing nets. He had an apple orchard. But he knew a guy who did that. So what he did, he went to the bank. He said to the banker, you know what, I need 10 pieces of gold here. How about we make a contract that I get 10 pieces now, and I'll pay you the 10 pieces back, 1 piece a year, the next 10 years, plus 1 piece in interest. So the banker, he saw, okay, I'm gonna make money right now. So instead of giving him the actual gold, he wrote out 10 certificates to the guy who wanted to start as a fisherman. 10 certificates saying, here's 1 gram of gold. The fisherman, the wannabe fisherman, got 10 certificates of wannabe gold. He went down to the fish and net producer, gave him those certificates. He produced him a fisherman, and the fisherman was in business. There's just one problem here. The 10 pieces of certificates of gold that the banker just wrote out to make 10% interest on, he didn't have that gold in his vault, because the banker, he figured out fast that he could write out all the certificates he wanted it, and nobody knew how many certificates he wrote out. So he could make interest on certificates that was worth nothing. So the bankers, they make a fortune on all this. But in this village of, let's say, 10,000 people, who on average had 1 certificate of 1 gram, all of a sudden, instead of 10,000 certificates was roaming around in the marketplace, there was 50,000 certificates roaming around in the marketplace. And what happened? Guys, they caught up, the population, they caught up to this scam. So what happened? The people, they figured out, I better go down to the bank and redeem and get my gold out, because this banker, he doesn't have all the gold that he's claiming in his bank. And of course, the 1,000 guys who came down first, they got the gold. The next guys who came down and said, I have a certificate here, I need my gold back. The banker, he said, sorry guys, I don't have it. So the banking system, they made a fortune on loaning out money that is gold that they didn't have by writing fake receipts. That's how bank loans, that's how credit came to be, very simplified, of course. Later on, as humanity evolved, this writing receipts, writing certificates of gold was handed over to the national government. Only the government could print money, certificates of gold deposited. In America, the government for many years had a rule that says whenever you have $35, you can come down to us, we will redeem it for 1 ounce of gold. So the public in America, it's the same all over the world, by the way, but I'm just doing it from an American perspective. Whenever, as an American, you had $35 notes, you could go down to the government, give them their note back, you'd get the gold. So still, money was gold. Paper was not money. Just like in the ancient days, we transacted in gold. It was a very good system because people believed and trusted their government. In the post-Second World War years, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, America have emerged as the world power, by far the richest country in the world, the most trustworthy government, the most stable government, the biggest military, the biggest technology advance in the world. So what happened was there was a lot of credibility into dollars. And of course, the American government, They knew that they had a lot of playing room here. So they enacted a lot of programs here in America. They did the Marshall Plans in Europe. They did the Vietnam War. They did the Great Society plans under Lyndon Johnson that cost a lot of money. And to finance all these projects, the government, they didn't tax the population. They created inflation. They created inflation by printing dollars. Remember, the ratio of dollars can only expand to the same degree that the American government have gold in their vault. So whenever people in France, in Europe, in wherever dollars goes, people knew this is as good as gold. In the 70s, early 70s, late 60s, the French, they started to figure, just like the villages back in the day, there's so many dollars floating around. We wonder, does America really have all that gold in their vault that if everybody came to redeem of a ratio of 1 ounce to $35, do they really have all that gold in their vault? So the French, we're not taking any chances. So the French, they came to America and said, we got a bunch of dollars here that we earned from you guys by selling your wine or God knows what, but all the dollars they had in France, they want to redeem that for gold. So there was a bank run, just like the villagers did on the commercial bank thousands and thousands of years ago. There was a run on the US Treasury for people around the world. They wanted their gold back instead of the paper money. Richard Nixon, he saw this coming, and from one day to the next, he stood up and says, by the way, we are not redeeming it any longer. We are not changing gold for dollars any longer. So from now on, dollars is what we transact in. Dollars is the foundation of all the money in the world. It's a free floating system. So just like back in the day, if you had a lot of US dollars back then, or if you had a lot of francs in France that you wanted to change first for $2 to the given exchange rate and then get your gold because gold was money, you're out of luck. You had nothing but paper. Just like the certificate holders out in the little village. Of course, out in the little village, those certificates became worth zero overnight. You're left holding the bank, you're bankrupted. That was not the case today, back then in 71, but it was the same foundation that was broken. So from 1971 till now, money is no longer gold. So for the first time, more or less, it's a very complicated and long history, but in more or less the last 50 years, money is no longer gold. The amount of money in the society is determined by the national governments, by the national banks. How much money do we print and how much money do we want in circulation in our country? That's what money is. A lot of people back then, they figured, you know what? Now there's no limit in how much money can be created. And they were right. When you look back at housing prices, real estate prices, you saw typically a house is $10,000 back in 55. Today, the same house is $1 million. How did something go up 100-fold or 1,000-fold? How could things go up like that in price? Because of course, it's not gone up that much. It's just a number. And the reason things have gone up like that is because of money printing. In those 50 years where there was no limits, the governments were not held accountable any longer. The money printing have gone crazy. We have been seeing, especially in the 70s, with inflation rates of 15%, 20% a year, that erodes the value of your savings. So look at your great-granddad. If he bought a house back then, the family farm for 10 grand, he kept it till today, and you want to sell it, you get $1 million for it. Wow, you got $1 million, that's nice. If your grandfather didn't buy that house back then, he just put the money in a safe deposit box and he handed you the $10,000 today, you'd have a $10,000. So all that purchasing power have been stolen from you if you kept it in currency. The modern day example is in Venezuela. 10 years ago, one Venezuelan bolivar had a high value, maybe close to 1-to-1 with the US dollars. Today you need 10 million bolivars to have $1. The Venezuelan government have financed their budget deficits by printing money. So if you had savings back then, if you had 10,000 bolivars back then, you could buy a car, you could buy a condo. Today you can't even buy an apple with the same amount of money. So it's a very important lesson to understand, and I urge you to look into this. Spend a couple of hours, Search monetary history. It's a hugely important subject. But the lesson is the last 50 years, inflation have been rampant. Assets have gone up in price, of course not in real terms, only in the nominal values. It's a very, very important subject. 10 years ago, in the libertarian, that's the freedom-oriented part of the world, a guy came up with a system known as Bitcoin. It was a system designed to replace the payment system we know today with the national currencies, dollars, euros, the Chinese yen, the Chinese renminbi, the Japanese yen, where money could not be printed any longer. In Bitcoin, there's only so many Bitcoins, meaning that when all the Bitcoins have been mined in the system, there can be no more. So nobody can steal your purchasing power overnight. Next thing, Bitcoin was designed so as you could transfer money to a guy without nobody knowing. Today, if I want to transfer money to anybody, I send the money to his bank account. It clears via the Federal Reserve System. So the government and the national bank system, they have a paper trail to see who paid who and when did they do it and what amount. Bitcoin, there's no trail. It's like if you handed over 5 grams of gold to a merchant 10,000 years ago. There's no trail of that payment. The guy who invented Bitcoin, he wanted to make a system like that in our modern age that worked in the internet age. Money that could be transferred without anybody knowing. Proponents of Bitcoin say, of course, we're in a new age now, and because of all the inflation everywhere, because of the anonymity of it, Bitcoin's going to be the future payment. Around a year ago, Bitcoin prices on a free market traded in dollars started to skyrocket. It started at less than $1. And the first 9 years, nothing much happened. It went up to $100. Of course, that's a 100-fold increase, but leave that out of it. When Bitcoin came into existence of the general public, it's kind of skyrocketed from $300 up to $20,000 a Bitcoin. That, of course, happened because all of a sudden, it was not only the libertarian part of the world who knew about this. It became knowledge of every man. Here we have the new payment system. And it's anonymous and it's very cheap to do. So all of a sudden, it became very popular and the price rose up like crazy. At that time, around November, December last year, I got a lot of text messages from my friends, both in America and in Europe, and saying, wow, we heard about this Bitcoin, what do you think about it? Can you make money on it? We heard a lot of people got millionaires and billionaires, and my friend and my uncle, they bought it when it was worth won $100, now it's worth 20 grand. They made $100,000 out of nothing. Should we get in on this? This seems to be the new thing. And for me, there's so many things to explain about Bitcoin, and I'm gonna try to go through it to the best of my ability. Again, it's a complicated subject, but there's so many sides of it. If you go with the investing aspect of it first, should I buy Bitcoin? If you go in to buy Bitcoin back then, I advised everybody to start to say, don't touch the Bitcoin. Don't touch it, because if you buy Bitcoin as a means of investing, to invest your savings to get richer, how do you value Bitcoin? Bitcoin have no cash flow. If you buy a stock, if you buy a BMW or General Electric stock, you can see, okay, I pay $10 a stock. On average, this stock pays me $1 in dividend. That means you get paid $1 to own this stock a year. You pay 10, you get 1, it's a 10% yield. Okay, you can look at the fundamentals of the company. Okay, what is the prospect of BMW staying in business? Are they able to outcompete Mercedes? You can do a factual analysis of, are they going to continue to make money so they can give you a dividend yield every year? You look at the investment with rational, calm, mathematical eyes. You could be right, you can be wrong, but you have a way of assessing what is the value of this based on the expected future cash flow of this. That's normally how you value an asset, the expected future cash flow. So Bitcoin went in price from $100 to $20,000. A lot of people they made a lot of money. So you as an investor, you saved up 100 grand. You want to put those to work instead of just getting zero and getting the purchasing power inflated away. You're going to buy Bitcoin with it. But my question to all these guys that call me was, how are you valuing Bitcoin? Oh, it's going to go up because it's the future. Oh yeah, but they said about a lot of things. For example, in the year 2000, before the Nasdaq bubble popped, They sold shares in a company called Pets.com. There was no company behind it, but everybody knew that Pets.com would be the future of selling pets online. Normal traditional pet stores would go bankrupt because online was the new thing, and people, they paid a fortune to get a share of Pets.com. Pets.com, of course, they burned through cash. They lost money every year. They didn't have a business. They only had a website, more or less, but people paid for it anyway. There was no cash flow. So if you paid $10 a stock, you got no money to own it. You couldn't analyze it. It was hype. It was the future, so to say. The same is with Bitcoin. People, they scream, say, this is the future. You gotta buy it because this, that, and the other. But how do you know it? You gotta stay away whenever there's hype in the market like that, where everybody yells and screams and run for it, and this is the new thing. That's the time when you say, you know what? I'm backing off. There's no substance in this. Realizing you might be wrong. Bitcoin might be the next big thing. Like Pets.com in year 2000 might be the big thing. But you, as a person with your hard-earned savings, you have no way of valuing this thing. It's pure hype. It's pure belief. Of course, since December back then, the price have fallen from $20,000 down to $6,500. Of course, the amount of Google searches spiked back then, meaning everybody and their brother, they looked at Bitcoin. Everybody wanted to get in. Now, nobody searched for it any longer. The price is falling apart. So that's the investment side of it. The next part is, what is the viability of Bitcoin as a payment system? You know, Visa and MasterCard, you use that as a means of payment. And when things are going well for those, each of those, I believe it's 13,000 payments Visa does a second. 13,000 payments a second. That's not easy to make something like that. Bitcoin, they have nowhere near that ability. I don't know the exact number, but it's around a millionth of Visa that Bitcoin can transact a second. It's incomparable. It's like comparing an elephant to a tiny microorganism. It has nothing to do with it. So Bitcoin as a means of payment doesn't work. It's way too slow. And it's way too cumbersome. The system works where other users verify the transaction. It's very cumbersome. It takes a lot of electricity. Right now, the Bitcoin network uses as much electricity as the whole country of Denmark. You know, the system doesn't work. It's a nice idea behind it. But think about a payment system that uses as much electricity as the whole country of Denmark, and which is extremely slow and extremely expensive. Visa, it costs zero, the same as zero to use Visa. It's basically nothing. Bitcoin is not so. Bitcoin is expensive to use. So Bitcoin as a factual means of payment to buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks, it doesn't work. The last and most important point about Bitcoin is the power of the national governments resides in the ability to tax income, to tax property. We've been used to that, but the last 50 years, a lot of the power in the governments is sitting in the ability to create money, to print money wherever it sees fit. And again, this is a long story. I want to make it as brief as I can, but I urge you, look into this. It's very important. It's very important to understand the world we live in right now. Japan, they came out hard after the Second World War, the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They boomed. Everybody thought that Japan would take over the world, become the new dominant power. Of course, in the late 80s, early 90s, the bubble popped over there. Ever since that, Japan have been in a structural decline in the sense that GDP have not risen much. They're standing still over there. And a very important thing in Japan is you got a lot of people getting into the retirement age, meaning the government have to borrow money to pay for retirement, healthcare, and such. So today, Japan, which is the second or the third biggest economy in the world, they have a national debt of 250-300% to GDP. That's 3 times as much as the next guys around. They have a huge debt. Despite of that huge debt, Japan only pays 0.1% on average for on their 10-year loans. How is that possible? They sell bonds on the open market. They have to sell up to $10 trillion of bonds. That's the outstanding loans of the Japanese government. But the catch is, right now, the Japan government, they owe half of the debt to themselves. So whenever the Japanese government needs money now, they put a bond for sale. Normally in the old days, before the money printing, they had to sell that bond, that loan, to a private investor who got a yield from doing that. Today, they just turn around, print the money, buy the bond. Meaning that the Japanese government right now, they're not loaning the money on the open market. They're just printing whatever they need. Or, in other words, 50% of the almost $10 trillion Japanese government bond market have just been printed out of thin air. That's right. The government in Japan, to finance the welfare state, to finance the predicament they're in, they have printed the difference. They have not collected it in taxes. They have not borrowed it on the open market. So without the ability to print the difference, to keep the government running, to keep the doors open, the government would have collapsed a long time ago. This is not a Japanese phenomenon. It happens in Europe right now. It happens in America. It happens everywhere. So my point is, there's a hugely tremendous amount of power hidden in the ability to be able to control the money supply. I am 100% certain that the governments are not going to give that up voluntarily. So let's say the Bitcoin system was able to transact fast, cheap, 50,000 transactions a second, all those things, which it can't. But let's say it could, and it was independent of the national government. You know what? The government's going to shut down a competing system like that, because the government, they're not going to give up that exclusive right to decide how much money is around and we can finance our military, our welfare state with it. They're not going to give that up. So the headwinds against Bitcoin is so tremendously that Bitcoin, in my mind, is a gigantic bubble. And the early adopters, those who bought it at $1, $5, $50, they made a fortune on the way up. And just like all bubbles, the Nasdaq bubble, the tulip bubble back in the 1600s, the South Sea stock market bubble back in Holland 300 years ago, where people, they get sucked in because of the hype, because of the get rich quick schemes, they're gonna lose all their money. Because to me, Bitcoin have no future. There's only headwinds. To sum it up with Bitcoin, the system doesn't work, it's expensive, it pollutes, and it faces, even if those things didn't exist, it faces the biggest enemy of all, the central governments of all in the world. They're not going to give up the power. If Bitcoin worked, they would shut it down. So if you own Bitcoins at this point, do get out of it. Don't speculate. There's no value in it. And let's say I'm wrong. You know, I'm probably not wrong, but if I'm wrong, in general, when you see something like this with no prospects but hype, get out of it. It's not a way to build your life. It's not a way to invest. It's a fool's game. So get out while you have the chance. I realize that I'm going to get a lot of questions on this, so I'm ready to answer it. I'm ready to debate it, but get out of it in time for your sake and for your family's sake, of course. That's all for this time. Thank you very much.